9 months ago, Peabody and Family Mosaic merged together, two great historic organisations. The first, the old Peabody, was actually born in 1862 when George Peabody, an American philanthropist, gave money to ameliorate the housing conditions of the poor of London. The second half of the business was born 50 years ago when, through the Cathy Come Home, and those of us that are old enough to remember that's now 50 years old, as I said, TV play, which got people off their backsides to do something about homelessness, particularly in London. Together, we own 57,000 homes and are building nearly 3,000 homes a year. Of the 57,000, 55 are in London, and 2 are in Essex, 2,000, not 2. And the homes we're building at the moment, of the 3,000 we're building a year, they are all in London. And we have a variety of estates, and I've just drawn a couple of pictures, sorry if we go back. There's a modern regeneration scheme in Lewisham, Steve here, I saw, and Parkside, and an old Peabody estate. But we also have lots of street properties. We bought, our founders bought Edwardian, Victorian estate, properties and did them up in the 70s and the 60s, and actually helped reclaim the Notting Hills, reclaim Dorstons and Brixtons for the future regeneration that's happened in the last 10 years. They were no-go areas at one point, and housing associations helped reclaim them for the good of all Londoners. And it's my objective to make sure they remain for all Londoners and don't exclude people. So today I'm just going to try and draw on that experience of that history and highlight lessons for future regeneration projects. So when George Peabody gave us that money 150 years ago, over 50 years they built 10,000 homes with his money, all in central London. And this here is a picture of an alleyway into the Blackfriars estate, which is about under a mile from here. It's a fantastic development and very traditional. We're known for the yellow brick construction. For those of you who work in London, when you see a Peabody estate, you know it. And actually, I think that helps the brand and is one of the things that Peabody has that other housing associations don't have. When you get in a cab, and when I used to get in a cab and said I work from Family Mosaic, nobody knew who they were. If I get in a cab and say I work for Peabody, they all know who it is. It's one of those brands that seems to cross into the daily language of people. And secondly is, I think residents feel very much part of it. There's a belonging on our Peabody estates. That's perhaps different from our other estates. If you live in one of our old Victorian estates, people are very proud of living there. It's very important to them. And a lot of that's to do with their location. It's to do with how simple they've been designed, this ageless quality that they have. And 150 years later, they're still in demand. People are queuing up to live in them. That they're not actually to 21st century standards. I do have a problem with them. Kitchens are small, bathrooms are small. They are hard places for people to live in, but there's huge demand. And that's because residents really choose, in central London, they choose location, price and security over quality, which is quite hard for us to say when we're to provide quality homes, but that's what people choose. That's why people end up living in sheds, because they want to be in central London. They need to be in central London for their work. And it's a really important dynamic that goes beyond us. It happens anyway. It's a wave that happens anyway. But the point I'm making here on this slide is that because they prioritise these over quality, we rarely talk about price and security and the importance of central London homes for ordinary Londoners and the importance of ordinary Londoners to London's economy. We tend to talk about it in the context of Section 106s, when I think it's a much bigger, wider strategic issue. This second slide, it's Charlton Triangle. In the late 1990s, councils transferred poorly maintained, and not their fault due to lack of funding, estates to housing associations. The stock transfer programme is one of the most successful housing programmes of the last 50 years. About 3,000 homes transferred to Peabody in King's Cross, Islington, Old Oak out in West London, and in Charlton in South East London. And we spent about £50,000 a unit repairing those homes, which probably at today's value is what, 75,000. A lot of money went into those homes to turn them round. And all of these homes actually started with a tenant ballot. Now in London there's been a debate about regeneration, and the London Mayor is insisting that all future regeneration schemes in London of estates where he is putting funding in, there is a tenant ballot. And there's quite a lot of resistance to this, but we're a big fan of them at Peabody. We think they're a great way of empowering people, involving people, and giving choice about their future. The challenge here is how are these going to be turned round in the early... these were turned round in the early 21st century, when there was a lot more funding, and the state invested a lot more. All of our estates that we got at the time came with a dowry from government. And that now doesn't exist. So when people talk about regeneration now, they're having to build housing for sale on the land to create a cross-subsidy to make the regeneration of the social housing work. And that, the phrase social cleansing is happening, not because that's what people want to do, but it's the only way financially it can work. We need a regeneration for regeneration to work in London, we need a new financial model. And the other issue is that we've learned on our work on that estate is the importance of community investment. And the state has been withdrawing from community investment as well. But think of today's big problems for young people in London. Think of the knife culture, guns and gangs. These people need new opportunities and hope for the future. And that includes a house, but much more. It means jobs, it means community investment. Gosh, it needs so much. And we're actually withdrawing from that every year. And we need to go back to basics and think about how we develop our estates in the future. The third one is about the Grosvenor estate. As well as the George Peabody legacy homes, we also have hundreds of homes on long leases from the Grosvenor estate. That's the Duke of Westminster's estate in London, primarily in Mayfair. And these are fabulous locations. If you look at this picture here, the white building is a 5-star hotel. There's an Italian piazza in front of you, and that's our housing on the right. Beyond the housing on the right is Oxford Street, and beyond that is Selfridges. Isn't it great that ordinary people can live in this location? And if you speak to Grosvenor, they will tell you they're the only people who live in that location. All the other housing that people don't live in, they're second homes, it's quiet at the weekends. So we are providing homes right where people, next to where they can work, but also where the community can be created. Without them, there is no community. And the lesson I wanted to draw on here is actually there are different models about the ways in which regeneration can be delivered. And some people talk about private developers being bad, or public being good and being needed. But actually, the private sector can care too. And Grosvenor here, I think, have done a fantastic job in making sure that we have remained there. Those homes didn't have to come to us. They could have gone to millionaires. But they gave them to us because they had a long-term view on the needs of Mayfair. So the difference isn't between private and public, it's between an in-and-out developer, for me, often a volume builder, who just wants to build and get out and move on to the next site, and a long-term patient investor. Grosvenor, Peabody, and others fit that category. Public sector, government plays that role too. And nowhere has that been highlighted to me more in the post-Grenfell world. We have 6 towers that needed the cladding removing a year ago. And we've done it, and we've replaced the cladding. They will all be completed shortly. We also have 10 blocks on estates where we just have the Section 106, and where the freeholder, where it's been developed by a volume builder, and they've sold the freehold on to mainly an investor who has no idea what to do about the cladding on their buildings, has no idea of place or what's going to happen in that area in the future. And I think there's a big issue for us going forward about who owns land going forward. In many ways, I quite like a freeholder licensing system, because people who own freeholds should have a long interest in that business and in developing the place for the future. Jumping more to the edge of London, 4 years ago, Peabody took over Thamesmead. Thamesmead is in southeast London, and it was a new town built in the 1960s. We own 6,000 of the 15,000 homes. Ours are the concrete ones. We have 21 towers there. We also own enough land to help build 20,000 new homes. London's new town. But this depends upon transport to unlock. At the moment, Thamesmead is a one road in, one road out town. And we're working with the London Borough of Greenwich and the London Borough of Bexley to build this town. And we're developing skills around retail and commercial, planning for schools, health, etc. And the key for us is collaboration. We've got the boroughs on board, that's great. We've brought Berkeley Homes in. We've just sold a site to them so they can build 1,300 homes. And we're in the later stages of creating a joint venture to build the riverfront for 11,000 homes. But people already love living there. And we must not create another Mayfair, another central London suburb. This is a chance to build a place for families, ordinary Londoners, with space to play. The water and the grass and the open space is as important here as what we do in terms of building. But our vision will also have to change during the 30 years. And the key to that, I think, is to have to be humble. It's quite hard for me to be that, and constantly be changing. The last example I'm going to show is 9 Elms. And really, I shouldn't have put this up because this is my bad example of regeneration. I should have put one of the more positive ones first. This has been an exceptional development achievement, but there isn't much social housing in there. It is an area being developed for the rich. We are getting 500 homes there, which is quite substantial for some of you around the country, but in context of what's being built there, it's not very much. And I'd like to thank Ballymore, Berkeley Homes and Battersea Power Station for that. And the reason why there is not good enough mix as far as I'm concerned there is because the developer's money has gone in to the transport to deliver an extension to the Northern Line. Great, it was needed, it had to be provided, but the balance between providing transport and what we're left with at the end of the day has gone too far towards the transport solution. So who's going to actually live there? Is it going to be another Mayfair? Well, we've now got the US Embassy there, so perhaps it is. Donald Trump might move them out shortly. Maybe I can take a short lease on that. Will people be there at weekends? Like, Mayfair is empty at the weekends, except for our tenants. And I don't think it's the model for future regeneration. I'm worried that it becomes known as a good example of how you can provide transport, but it's a bit one-dimensional in that aspect. So just to close, and just reflect on my 150 years in this business, I'm an advocate of the patient investor model in regeneration and the community anchor, and Peabody tries to play that part. I think the developer approach, where a developer can buy land and develop it out, and the Section 106 dictates what that mix is going to be, is the wrong way to look at regeneration. Buildings and good design add value, but investment in communities and culture is key, and we have to work out ways of getting those revenue streams back into regeneration. Regen is complex, multidisciplined and multi-speed. At Thamesmead, it's been amazing. I've got a really good idea where I'm going for 30 years residentially. What's the high street in Thamesmead? I have no idea what it will be in 5 years' time, never mind 30 years' time. So the flexibility we're having to build into retail, commercial and office space is fascinating. And London's diversity is what makes London, and it's worth protecting strategically. So like I said, I think the Section 106 driven policy is not the way to do it. I believe the boroughs should be talking about the mix they need to achieve and how they work to that rather than on a site-by-site basis. And finally, transport is the double-edged sword of development. Transport is going to enables regeneration. It's fantastic, but it increases value. Yes, we try and capture that land value, but if we don't capture that land value and keep it, it will also drive out the ordinary Londoners. And that's one of London's hugest challenge. You can't do regen without it, but it excludes local people with it. And on that joyful note, we've got a final one of Thamesmead. I'll show you an aerial view of Thamesmead. And we've got huge opportunities down there, and I look forward to working with you on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. That's enormously generous talk. A couple of questions, and even from people who've been on the panels. Yes.
Stuart Robinson, TfL. You mentioned and you praised the patient investment model, obviously equity-based provision, but the first example you gave in Thamesmead, the first phase you gave off to Berkeley Homes, which are obviously volume house builder, sort of finish it, photograph it, then disappear off. Comment.
Great. When you're doing regeneration, it's a bit more complicated than that. So the first phase is actually us building. So we're building 500 homes in Thamesmead near Abbey Wood Station. We've got a second site just behind that for another 1,000 homes. But what you're trying to do is create a mixed communities. And in some of our communities, we have too much social housing, and we're looking to build in a mix. So bringing someone like Barclays in does two things. Sometimes it brings in a mix where you need it, the other way. And two, it helps spread the risk. So they take the developer risk, not us. And we get 300 social housing homes out at the end of that. And thirdly, you're bringing a brand like Barclays into Thamesmead. So part of placemaking is actually brand making. And bringing them in actually helps and change the brand and how people think about an area. Good question, but it's a bit more complicated than that.
Another question? Okay. Well, Brendan, we've got one from Leicester. Okay.
I was just thinking about the images you put on about Grosvenor Hill, and completely applaud you for what you're doing. But how do you resist releasing the value from a Grosvenor Hill and making that build 10 houses somewhere else?
By your overall vision being very strong about the need for London to be a diverse place, and the really important value of keeping ordinary people living in central London. So if that's at the top of your agenda, then you make those decisions. But if I sell them, it's a one-way ticket. And once I've gone, I can never come back. And that's one of the big problems with site-driven development. We make a decision, the market might be that the developer can't afford much Section 106. It's provided, and that value is lost forever. So if we leave an area in central London, we can't come back. The final thing is, actually, they're the best performing values, in terms of when I'm borrowing money, the banks love them. So actually, they give great security to enable me to go and build elsewhere as well.
Okay. Well, Brendan, I am hugely grateful to you, and can we come over and do some more interviews with you and your architect designer? I think I mentioned that on the phone. So that would be great.
There's a few of them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.